boulevard, the grass between the street and the sidewalk is pretty dominated by weeds at this point, but no weeds, so it still looks okay. But this, the trees within that median, there's 3 locust trees, and I think they've all died. They're pretty small and pretty not healthy. And so on each median, we took those out and proposed to replace those with the 5 kind of new trees. And then this one, luckily the irrigation system is in place. And so it's just a matter of, and Public Works has already tested this one. It is functional and able to run. It just needs to be turned on, probably a little revisit on the program and the control box just to make it function. So,
good question. So the far left-hand red notices remove existing concrete ribbon and sod, replace with MnDOT salt tolerant sod.
yes,
So we're actually going to have more sod there than there is today.
yes.
And will that salt-resistant sod then also resist weeds, or what's the plan for weed control in that area?
Well, that'll come later on for just the maintenance. But yeah, it'll be tied in for herbicide and fertilization treatment.
Gotcha.
So that'll kind of show up later on maintenance costs.
Okay, thanks.
For keeping the irrigation system on, keeping it healthier, a little more robust, that'll kind of keep those weeds back as much as possible without the chemical treatment.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the concrete ribbon is the colored concrete. That was kind of the original design, but it seems like it's slowly being removed by the county and through city projects, just some quality issues with that first generation colored concrete. It's kind of falling apart. I think that's pretty common. Just the additives weren't as great as we all thought they were going to be. That happens in landscape. Plants don't turn out to be, you know, the hot new thing in the market doesn't always work out. So throughout all of these, we'll be removing or proposing to remove those colored concrete ribbons. And so that's about 1 foot wide, about half the table width, and so that will be additional sod, kind of green space between the street and the sidewalk.
I think there's 2 kind of, just to bounce off Lucius, you either should concrete the whole thing in or try to give as much space as possible with the grass. I think that thin strip, the more grass you have in there, the better you have it for it to survive. If you're going to keep it thin, you should probably think about concrete in, but we also heard back that we want trees are good options and that green so it doesn't look like that concrete jungle type of a look. So I think even if the irrigation works there and that fence isn't there, I think putting better sod in there and putting those new trees in there, aesthetically is the best option. And those banner poles as well, not only is it for us to work on, I don't know if you've gone over that bridge and noticed it, but it's very difficult to see if you're going to take a left when traffic is coming on both sides of the bridge. Both sides we kind of have shown that we're going to add concrete past that, try to get a little more sight distance there. There's a lot of accidents that happen, especially if you're traveling east, people turning on to I-35 north, they can T-bone in an intersection. They don't see those cars coming those Norman Foster. So to try to get a little more, not only give us a place to work, but a little more sight distance there by those intersections.
Any other questions on this area? Okay. Well, all the costs for kind of completing this and the maintenance will be kind of summarized at the end, but it might work out having we can kind of shuffle them around when we look at those cost columns.
Sure.
So then moving to the east on the next sheet, the I-35 to 12th Street, it looks fairly similar, kind of taking out that color concrete ribbon, again, proposing to replace that sod in the median in between the street and the sidewalk. And then because we're going to replace, there's 3 locations where we propose replacing that existing landscape with the concrete, and that kind of times out with more banner poles, street signage from the highway. I'm sure the landscape went in and then the signs came in after the fact, and so it doesn't always jive where you have taller plants kind of covering some of those signs. And then also kind of aesthetically looking for kind of that pattern or that repeatability in the landscape as you proceed down the street. Just to kind of, you'll notice like landscape, concrete, and kind of visually it works. Like you won't be like, oh my God, that one's concrete, I don't get it. It'll flow as you work your way toward Lake Street. That's my job, I guess, to watch out for those kind of things.
Right.
But again, the trees on this one in the boulevard are much more healthy, much more established. So no replacements proposed on this one. Trying to leverage as much of the original as we can. But in the median itself, we have several trees that are just missing from the original design. I'm sure they died and came down, and so this would replant those. And then we would also redo the plantings in the median. And the question is, can we save what's there? Because there were, I think, 9 species planted originally, and only like 2 or 3 really survived without the irrigation. And the answer is, I think it's better to take everything out and kind of restart from the same plane, just because all that mulch that's been going in there has been building up that soil profile around those plants, and so you don't really have any room to put the mulch back in. So we would come and kind of scrape everything down 4 to 6 inches below the curb, kind of rebuild that, replant that, and then mulch. We'll talk about what kind of mulch, if we want to do wood or rock, as we get toward the costs and kind of the maintenance costs. Now this section, this is one that a full irrigation replacement is required. I think the main was cut, or at least the wires were cut to the valves, and then there's breaks, and Public Works wasn't able to really verify that it would even function. So we're just assuming it's a redo. So as we would take all these things out, that would be the time to get into that irrigation system and rebuild that, and then start putting everything back. The good news is the irrigation control box is there, and so the water supply is there. So it's not like we have to tap into the water main or anything. That should be working. So. On Broadway and 7th, this was one of those opportunities for something different when we were looking at it. When we took the tour, Dave and the other guys knew that this irrigation system was totally cut off. There was irrigation in here. Wherever that control box is now just been concreted over, so like everything is just lost. And to get things back there would be a fairly major effort. And so as we're standing there, I saw an opportunity of maybe this one is one we don't irrigate. Maybe we could do a stormwater demonstration project here, do some curb cuts, there's some road buckles and some other improvements coming with the county. And so maybe it's just an opportunity to do something a little different, because these are the biggest and healthiest trees in the project areas. And so if we can strategically kind of excavate in between those trees, place a structural soil, which is like a mineral coated rock. And so it gives you void space for that water to go, but that also gives the space for those tree roots. Plants will actually grow into this rock media. It's proprietary, patented by Cornell University, so it's a little pricey, but it's a pretty cool way to get that stormwater storage and still grow things. And so this would be that strategic, kind of scrape everything off around those existing trees, excavate down 3 to 4 feet as we can. You know, we're not sure what that soil is, and we don't want the curves to start falling in or anything. But we would backfill that with that structural soil. And then for this one, I think it's pretty unanimous. We would just rock mulch the whole thing. Because right now it's just there with these pretty beautiful onlocust trees. So it'd be a great way to get kind of that stormwater improvement, kind of maybe a partnership project with the watershed district right down the street, and kind of keep those trees and just make this one its own little demonstration.
So there's 3 trees there.
There are, yep.
in really good shape too. So,
What kind of?
Honey locust.
So when I was leaving the workshop last time, I saw the pre-treatment devices and took a picture and put it on the slide. So, just in case anybody was curious what it might look like, it might be a little different just for the snow plowing. You don't like having those deep cuts are a little annoying just because they catch the blade. But there's ways to kind of design around that, so.
Okay.
All right, Broadway and Lake Street, the most complicated part. Just because there's a lot going on, there was a lot of landscape space. Focusing in on the roundabout itself, really the only improvements proposed are replacing the 5 existing evergreens. It was 5 on plan, they've kind of grown into one another. So it would be an easy opportunity to replace them and maybe put fewer back, just to give Public Works a little more room to put Christmas lights on for the holiday decoration, and just so, because they're Colorado blue spruce and they tend to start aging out around 20 years. That was one of those like, hey, this is the best plant ever, it's blue. And then now 20 years later, the industry's like, oh, they kind of thin out and die on back sides and on the bottoms. And so just kind of lesson learned, we could put 3 of those back and just kind of like, this is a 20-year cycle, or you could go with like a Black Hill spruce. It's kind of a native alternative.
How old are those?
I would have to look back to the original plans.
How old is that one?
9 or 10 or something.
It's gotta be, I'm gonna do 2010 or 12.
2000.
Plans are stamped 2010.
2010?
2010. That's when the landscaping plans are.
Okay.
So those 5 that are there now would come out entirely and then replace with 3
Yes,
different?
a little smaller going back in.
Are you able to get some size in those so that we're,
Yes,
what's replenished, will they be?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm assuming smaller than what's there now, but
Yep.
it's not like starting over.
no, you can specify that stock size, very common is like a 6-foot or an 8-foot tree out of the yard, but if we wanted to find big trees, we could spade big trees, but you spend more, like there's cost, size and cost go up together, so. But there are options, so it's not like little 4-foot trees can go back
That'll be,
and really be shock.
that'll be a social media topic, so just prepare for some advanced communication on what's happening with the trees.
Sure.
There'll be lots of opinions.
There was the hesitation about putting that on plans.
Yeah, well, and then
So,
I think also it's maybe an opportunity to share in advance what the after vision's gonna be and why and all of that.
Yeah, with that, sharing that, are we able to get a little bit more detail with a picture on how this might look so we can show the public, or is this about as much detail as we'll get?
We can do perspective renderings, kind of take the trees out and kind of like, here's the intermediate look, and then here's
Well,
like from the
just
street.
Well, in general, the whole landscape, because this is an expensive project, so people are gonna wanna know what they're getting for their money. So, a little more detail than just hand drawn things on a Google map thing might be helpful.
For sure, I believe that'll be the next step of, once city council says this is what we want, then you'd approve him to put together plans and specs and then renderings, so that would be all one package of, here's your construction plans and here's what everything should look like.
Really kind of inventorying everything. The inclination was like, oh, let's just start marking out the as-built drawings, but the concept wasn't gonna float. We didn't want to get into that detail yet, but no, it'll be a much more professionally designed project moving forward.
I pulled this down this rabbit hole on this particular topic, but I think there's some more things going on this slide in particular, right?
Yes, there are. So expanding out from the roundabout itself, there's these little, we call them median keys,
Yeah.
where kind of lanes kind of merge together, then split to go around. That was originally landscaped, all of that was landscaped and irrigated, and now it is just mulch in its current condition. And kind of touring the site, seeing how busy it was and talking with public works staff, it's like, do we really want to go through the effort of putting the plantings back? What if we just converted it to turf grass? And as we're kind of standing there, it's like, how do you logistically get your mower on all those spots without, endangering the staff? And so in the end, we decided those are so small, it's just hard to landscape such a small area that it's probably best just to concrete those off. Because the original planting was one of the tallest grasses, that Carl Forrester grass, clumps, and it's like 4 feet tall. Works for me because I'm 6.5 feet tall, so people can see me hovering over the grass, but somebody shorter could surprise a vehicle.
Right.
Was that around even by the crosswalks? That big yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, and that's where that creates that little hide,
Yeah.
for the sight lines.
Yeah.
So we proposed pulling those out, and then to the west of the pedestrian bridge, we kind of kept that same, like, okay, let's take out some of that original, let's just put in concrete. Along here, there is very little sod in that median between the street and the sidewalk. It's already been replaced with concrete, and there's just these couple little patches just west of the bridge.
Is this on the Broadway? This is Broadway?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And so it was like, it looks like it's going all concrete, let's just go all concrete for consistency through there and focus on the medians. Now, the big project to the south of the roundabout are two and a little raised curb planter. And so again, being kind of a pattern individual, there was one little raised bed planter just on the north side of Broadway. And again, it was odd because it didn't match anything on the other side. And so I'm like, well, and it's really small because they tried to put it between street and sidewalk. Let's just take that out because everything to the west of that bridge was going to become concrete. Let's just keep that consistent. But there's the parking lot, and we talked about we could expand that parking lot and gain several spaces. And to butt up to that parking lot, originally it could have been turf grass, so it'd be that parking lot, turf grass, and then just curb. But again, it doesn't match that south side of the street, and so I'm proposing bringing a curb raised planter to that north side just to kind of match. So it almost kind of creates that gateway. When you get to Lake Street, get the glimpses of the lake, and then the big roundabout, you really feel like you're here in town. So that was the big move. And then just going through those existing raised beds right now, they're all wood mulch, and so kind of propose same thing, scraping that all off, that 6 inches, rebuild, replant, remulch, and then make sure it's consistent kind of to the north as well.
So you would replant those, so it's, what is adjacent in that southwest corner, so the empty lot, the southwest corner, you would replant that, and then you would also replant on the southeast corner, right, kind of in front of Shoreside?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and that one on the vacant lot has existing trees growing very well. The one to the southeast has 2 missing trees, but 2 trees that are growing well. So it would be getting all of those trees back and then doing that foundation planting on the ground plane around those trees. Just because I don't want to lose everything, just like, oh, it all went to concrete and it all just still trying to create that entrance.
So on both those both the empty lot and in front of the shore side, hopefully we're talking some development on that empty lot and hopefully redevelopment on the shore side property. Is there opportunities to delete that and allow for more water treatment or something? I think maybe we kind of keep that part open, just based on what may or may not happen there, ideally something does happen there sooner than later, but to invest a bunch of money and then maybe it potentially gets taken out. Conversation, I don't know what the right of way, obviously city must own that big corner, but if there's opportunity to give some of that back to allow for that lot to be more developable, if that's a word, I think we should try to keep that open.
We have history on that corner, don't we, Dave?
Yep, so the southeast side it's all in right away, it's MnDOT right away, and we're working through the southwest side, MnDOT wants all that right away. It was supposed to be given to them when we did the roundabout, and there's some legal snafu that didn't happen, so we've been working with some of those survey crews and trying to turn that back. So that the back side of that part on the southwest side will all be right away. So both of those beds will be in right away.
So
If
how
it's
does
in
that,
right, if it's in right of way, would that count for stormwater management if we were to do, no? I interrupted your
so
question.
what about, and this is longer term, I don't know where we stand on this, but the turn back to the county, where is that? So we're gonna turn this back to this, that right away, they want that, and then how would that look if the county ends up with that?
So whoever is the road authority is gonna want right away over the entire roundabout to the back sides of all the sidewalks, all the way around that whole entire area. So that MnDOT has it all the way up to the pedestrian crosses, up to the bridge. The only thing they don't have is that southwest side, but that was a legal error that part of the construction project specifically listed there that should be right away and turned over to MnDOT, and it just never happened. And when they were doing the concrete project, Washington County they found that error and realized it was still technically city property, but it should be dedicated right away.
So as you kind of go to the, so look at the raised bed on the southeast corner, and you go north, you called out where there's a couple of things you're gonna concrete there in the roadway. But as you stay along the sidewalk towards that roundabout on the far east side, are we doing anything with those beds? Those are ground level.
Yep. I think in the first workshop, it didn't transfer over to this plan, but we had planned on resodding that area. Just kind of cleaning that out and then just turning it all to turf grass. I apologize, I put a label
Is
right over the
that
top of it.
between Shoreside and the Plaza Building roundabout? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, there's a blue fence there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just drive by it every day, so. Right now, it looks great. It's good now.
Yeah, we just mowed it all down, I've just been knocking it down like that, but that was kind of the feeling there, is it's just in a weird spot to try to maintain that, and it's in that parking lot, before it was hanging over into the parking lot, and it just looked clear with turf there.
Is that irrigated?
It's a very interesting conversation with the right of way and kind of those raised beds, but I think a strategy could be to kind of hold that part of the project back as like a phase number B, just if there's some uncertainty about what's happening or what's coming there, like that would be an easy piece to kind of take out of this plan. And we'll talk more about phasing when we start looking at the cost, because this is the biggest footprint, I'm surprised it's the biggest cost, and so maybe that is a factor where we say, well, let's just kind of not worry about those right away, or whenever this would be a phase to go forward.
The hard part about that is the rest of that's all gonna get cleaned up, and those are bigger sections, and it's just gonna look like the forgotten corners. Is there an interim solution that would make it look more finished, but not have a massive amount of reinvestment and maintenance because right now, if we were to do all of the other sections and just leave that, I think it's gonna be Sarah.
We were really talking about planting a couple trees in each of those.
Yeah, so at least getting the trees back, so it's a full bed, at least like a tree planter bed. I'm not sure what the thoughts are right now with the wood mulch. Just maintaining that wood mulch so it's a clean ground cover around those trees.
So Dave, point of clarification on the right of way. So I thought I heard you say that the right of way is to the back of the sidewalk. So is that raised bed on the southwest? You're saying that's right of way as well, though?
Yeah, the right of way is to the, almost right to the building.
We're on the southwest corner.
So the
West.
west,
The empty lot.
you go, they're drying, I'm trying to load the drying, but it's, I can't get it to load. Working on, but the line is showing it behind, following the arc on the back side of that landscaping.
So I guess the reason I ask is that as we contemplate the idea of expanding that parking lot on the northwest corner and adding a raised bed, what if that is our property to do with what we want versus the county or states on the northwest corner?
Yeah, you're just gonna have to follow that right of way line and stay behind that. That, or if it's landscaping, they may allow that in, but if they aren't gonna let a private property owner use it for stormwater management or for their property, so I think you're requesting that, say, hey, can we put this planting bed in that right of way? You can't go the opposite way of, can we use this right of way for private, that makes sense.
So they might also allow parking lot, expanded
The
parking lot.
parking lot that he has drawn in there would all be on city property. It would just be kind of like, same on that other side, if you watch that curve kind of come around on that roundabout, that's pretty much what they would want for the right of way. So if you would put your parking lot behind that sidewalk, wherever you fit it there for a number of spots, do what you fit it in.
Gotcha.
Other points of feedback on this?
It's the most complicated one, so I anticipate there's gonna be more conversation and just kind of how we finalize that solution.
Yeah.
Then the final two are the roundabouts on 97, and they're similar in design originally, and we're keeping it similar in design moving forward. Just wanted to note the irrigation on the Broadway and Lake Street project. That one does have major rework needed as well, so it's not fully functioning and ready to go. So we'd have to have kind of like our final landscape plan figured out so that that irrigation could be modified and reinstalled according to what we want to do, just to minimize rework moving forward. The roundabouts, there is no irrigation system now, and it's not recommended, just the feasibility of where do we get water, where are we gonna put the control box, just the logistics. And I think we can get away without it, just by modifying the landscape a little bit. It was originally designed as these concentric rings, think of like a bullseye of different plant species. Some of them are still there, some of them have not fared as well. And then on the south roundabout is, the center has been taken over with sumac. So right now it's a nice fire red with the fall color.
Looks so intentional.
Right. Well, I kind of stole that as a precedent because that is very low maintenance.
Yeah.
This stuff spreads on its own and just kind of grows. And so what we did is we simplified from the 4 or 5 original rings, we just simplified down to 2. And so the big ring would be a rock mulch, just kind of scrape everything down, place it with rock mulch, easy to maintain and keep weed free. I say easy because it's not me doing it, but that would be, hand pull chemical treatment, you can keep that down looking fresh. And then the next ring in would be catmint, which is in the photo, both photos now. That's kind of that plant on that outside ring. That is one of the species that has survived really well in all the landscaping. And then in the middle, just proposing to do that sumac for both of the roundabouts. And on the next slide is a picture of some of the plants that were originally designated for the plantings. Daylily, the Walker's Low Catmint, Carl Forster Reedgrass, and the Little Blue Stem were all in the original design. Those are all good choices and choices that we would recommend as well moving along. The Staghorn Sumac in the lower right-hand corner is kind of our new introduction to the original design. There were many other plants. I don't have that table from the first workshop, but we did list everything that was on there. We color coded, like the red didn't survive, green maybe, and then yellow, and then green definitely survived. There were things like barberries, plants that are now understood to be noxious weeds that we don't buy and sell in the landscape trade anymore. So those have been omitted and just kind of simplified down to these, just to help kind of put some visual on what those plants look like in their prime, in their bloom. So we get to the fun stuff, the installation and maintenance costs. So we did individual project estimates, treating each one of these areas as its own project, just to account for, having project management, traffic control, everything, and not assuming that this would be done in one shot. And so we went through and just tallied all those areas, ran the calculations, and kind of summarized it down into this table just to break out some of those different things. Irrigation modifications is one that wildly goes from zeros where we don't need it or we're not recommending it to fairly pricey line items for those rebuilds of those two systems. And then the hardscape and landscape is fairly proportional to just the size of the project, the square footage. And so we added those all up and put a 25% contingency on it, just because we haven't really formally designed it. We just did some quick calculations just to see what the reaction was to kind of these budgetary numbers. So that first row is the installation cost of doing, like I said, each one of these projects as an individual project, kind of as illustrated in the hand graphics. I know it was a question at the first workshop was, okay, that's installation, but what's the maintenance cost? And so we started to get into that as well, the increased maintenance costs, kind of working with Dave and staff on what are you doing now, how long do you think it would take to take on these additional things, and just kind of came up with calculations on hours and rates and future replacements, assuming like 10% of the plants die every winter. It just happens, and so knowing that we have to go replant those in the spring, kind of pulling it all in. And so the third line on that table is that future refresh costs in the next 10 years. So trying to do like a life cycle estimate on that, so we know we're going to do a couple replacements every spring. We know if it's wood mulch, that's got to get refreshed every couple of years and taken all the way off every 7 to 10 years. And just trying to help paint the picture. And I think that was one of the issues of how we're here now, is the maintenance for many reasons wasn't known, wasn't done. It is what it is. And so just to keep on that is very important, so that we're not doing these major reinstallation costs very frequently. So just wanted to illustrate that. And the next table, and I'm sure we won't want to talk about any of these costs now before I get into how we broke down maintenance and kind of some assumptions in that line.
How does this compare, Dave, to what we had put in, dropped into the preliminary 10-year plan?
The preliminary 10-year was, I believe, 775,000, but that was just to replace as existing. That wasn't assuming that we were adding other features crews weren't, we were assuming that majority of the irrigation worked and that it just needed to get kind of readjusted. Didn't bring in the two roundabouts to the south, and then just the addition to the concrete and all that, that was just specking in that you're gonna drop a couple plants in that existing, so. That was best guess, and that was 2 years ago too, so unfortunately everything costs more.
So that total,
But 775, 750 is what is in the 10-year plan right now, over several years, right?
Yes, I believe he has, Christina had, Kevin's put like 145,000 in every year for what, five
Was
years?
it 5 years?
For the total of 725, yeah.
Okay, I was just trying to reconcile with what's in there.
And I think you said this, but let me ask again, because it didn't stick. Increased annual maintenance cost, is that hard costs on top of what we would be doing today? When I say hard costs, that is actual new plants, those would, it's not labor at Public Works time.
it's both.
It's both,
It
okay.
is product costs, and then on the next slide, that's a great question. We went through and we looked at some of those maintenance activities in the first workshop, and we brought those in to this to ask, and this is where I was working with Dave, was what are you mowing now? What would be new to be mowed? And we kind of went back and forth, like, how do we illustrate this so it's not like double counting things that they're already able to do, and then just the additional. And so in that second table for the increased maintenance activity, there's hours, just kind of well, if we have to go fertilize 2 times per season, that adds 3 hours for one section. And we came up with all those hourly costs and then applied kind of the average staff rate to come up with that cost. But then in that bottom line, we knew we had an annual replace the winter losses. We just kind of did that 10% of the other estimate on the first table. But then we also got into an additional hard cost of the mulch. And this is where, where Public Works definitely prefers the rock mulch, just because it doesn't have to be refreshed as often. Wood mulch just deteriorates, turns into soil. And so it just saves time. It's a little more costly product, but it does save kind of that frequency of having to do things to refresh it and make it, keep it looking great.
And so this price here, these hard, large numbers, that contemplate rock grout, or is that mulch?
It is both.
Okay.
I was coming at it, I'm always hesitant with rock mulch. I always hear horror stories of people picking it, throwing it at cars and windows and stuff like that. I don't know if that's really going to be an issue, but I hear that. And so what I proposed and we estimated was all the rock mulch is in the median, in the middle of traffic, where people are less likely to go get rocks to cause problems. And then kept some wood mulch, but mostly for those initial plantings, because when we plant all those plants, they're a little small. And the strategy is to do block planting, so it's like this area is one plant, this area is another plant, to simplify maintenance and just to make it more orderly for that visual. And so you put that wood mulch in, and the goal is, it probably doesn't happen as often as we like, is that those plants grow so dense that you don't need that wood mulch anymore in the future. So that's why I say both. Just so we weren't kind of trying to cover myself in the budget too, just in case we're like, no, we don't want any wood mulch. It's like, okay, great. Or we don't want any rock mulch. The wood mulch will be a little cheaper. So we try and set these estimates up so that we're kind of working our way down as we get closer and go out for bids.
But regardless of what scale we end up doing on these, or which ones we focus, I think rock has to be the way go forward is for public works and not have that maintenance. And just, you put mulch down within a year or less than that, looks like, it doesn't look good. It's already faded. Just have to spend money up front.
I think Lucius brings up a good point though, like what you're doing, your block mulch, that's, or your block planting, you put your mulch there, but all your perimeter and all your areas where you have that spacing, that integrates the rock, it looks cleaner, it's way easier to spray and maintain. And exactly when we put all that mulch down before the 4th of July, it looks like it's 5 years old already out there. Which is kind of disheartening too when you put it out there and it just fades on you right away.
Or washes away.
My personal preference as a designer is rock mulch. Residential, absolutely. People are throwing rocks at your own windows, but I guess maybe that's just rumor, but I've heard horror stories of things happening, especially bigger rocks. The bigger they are, the more they break.
I mean, as far as increased costs with maintenance, I mean, the biggest hit is irrigation, but I mean, that's probably a given. You're running 3 more systems, it's just that startup and blow, that's part of what it is. It's just doing those systems in this fall and spring and then, monthly checks to make sure it's running, but the rest of it, if we have a plant maintenance plan to stay on it, it's not very, it's not like we need 2 more full-time people and 3 seasonals to take care of this. It's not really that overwhelming. This exercise can help you see that too, that it's not a little extra time. It's a couple times a year where you have to spend a little extra time there, but it's not, holy cow.
It's good. Should we do it?
When, I'm just making sure I understand, on the chart for the maintenance, or the design and maintenance cost chart, Lake Street, what you have in the column for Lake Street, that is both, is that Broadway and Lake?
Yes, everything illustrated in that plan.
Okay, it's Broadway, it's everything at the Broadway and Lake intersection. It does not include, and then the roundabouts were separate, okay. The north and south roundabouts on 98 and 97, okay.
And probably should have expanded that label just to match the slide,
that's
but
okay.
everything pictured in here is in that column.
I was gonna ask if there was a natural break on that Lake Street downtown roundabout being broken up into several projects, but then that just also is exactly the opposite of my concern on not doing those medians. It's a large piece, so.
Does that include the $500,000? Does that include the expansion of the parking lot?
Yes.
The expansion of what?
The parking lot?
The parking.
So that, could that be a future, can that be broken off as a separate project?
I think there's a couple of phases you could do in there. If we started kind of the medians, kind of clean up everything on the street first, and then come back for the boulevards, or maybe those go together, but the parking lot could be its own project. Adding that raised curb planter could be a whole different project, or maybe all of those are a different project, kind of pending the right-of-way conversations or whatever is coming down kind of for future development. So I think there is opportunity to break it up.
I think if you designed it, I think your parking lot would be better served bidding it as part of your road project. You get a little better prices on removables and paving and the curb and all that. I mean, it would still be dollars spent, right? But I think you'd see a definite savings if someone's building a $2 million project that they're gonna add a parking lot versus one contractor coming and do this little tiny lot. So that's probably a place you can split it all. You can still put in that planter and then the parking lot,
Especially because it's different disciplines. Having a commercial landscape contractor, they're gonna end up subbing somebody for the bituminous for the parking lot, so they're gonna mark that up. And
if, you know, and I guess initially that it's not, obviously it's a little scary, bigger than we anticipated. I think for me personally, the 97, the north and south 97 roundabouts, you know, it's not, you don't have as much pedestrian traffic and your cars are moving as quick, so for me, that's not as much of a priority as downtown or Broadway as your entrance into town. I mean, I get you're coming from the south, but after you guys clean cut it last fall, it's slowly, it's a little unsightly now, but I think it looks like a more of a natural look with that sumac and everything. So if we're looking, if this number is overwhelming to take right now, I think that for me would be something we would just push off. I could live with that piece side of it and focus more on Broadway and downtown. It's just,
I agree.
I would agree.
And those could always break off, and you could totally go back to the first workshop. Was it just converted to turf? Is that a different option on those two?
I mean, there's a precedence for that. So the other was, the Slates was downtown, the downtown corridor.
So I definitely agree. It's like if the budget is big, so let's keep it to the Broadway corridor, kind of focus on that, or
So would you just sequence these from left to right as you have them, or would you take pieces of each one because they're common disciplines?
7th Street is its own thing. And so I think that would be, I would go to the watershed and say, can we partner on this? You know, is there a cost share for doing a demonstration project? And just, that's its own little project, just because it'll look different. It does look different. And then maybe you do the 2 sections around 35 as one project, and then a set, or all of Lake Street, Broadway and Lake Street as a second project. So almost like 3 pretty easy phases to focus on that, doing our special project and focus on that, or vice, whichever order do it.
so I had sent an email to staff about deed and some grants there. I don't know if this would be eligible because it's city-owned or that. I didn't really read deeply into that. It was just sent this evening. Anyway, deed has some grants out there for streetscapes on downtown corridors and stuff. And so I don't know, maybe staff's already aware of that, those grants are.
I didn't see that one, I have to look into it more. It sounds like the city can apply, but maybe the chamber could, or we could apply on behalf of the chamber. You know, it'd be, I think it kind of reads that they would be the partnering with the city to do some type of project where if they got the grant, you know, then the city would match their grant or whatever. So I didn't have a chance to look
Yeah, it was
all
late.
through it, but yeah, definitely. It's end of November, I think it expires. So
It's got a time frame.
I know, it's quick.
Quick turnaround, because I think it's the final funding of, yeah.
Definitely.
Do you have some ability to look into that and see if it?
I'll definitely look into it tomorrow and see, look through the application or RFQ or whatever they're asking for, to see how daunting it is or if it's something we can qualify for.
I think as we have some groundwork, we have some ideas what we want to do, so.
The one on 7th, if that's something we want to do, we may want to let the county know, because they may be able to do that curb work for us. If they're going to be redoing the road, they're actually probably going to want to do that curb work versus us tearing back into the road. I was thinking in my mind that maybe we could get them to do, as part of their open, to do those center meetings, but it would have to be timed out that you knew you were going to come back and do that landscaping, because they'd be ripping all the landscaping off. I think definitely that one on 7th, maybe convince them to at least get that, either way to have that done as part of that road project next summer.
Yeah.
So at least we're not coming back to it.
Was it you this, like, around 19th and 12th, where we're taking out that colored concrete? I mean, is that something that we want to partner with them on this, and they're going to be doing that anyway?
It's something we could definitely ask them. I think some of that stuff on Lake and Broadway might be getting removed as part of their project too, so they have to just kind of see what their final plans are, and they may be putting concrete back in there. If MnDOT jumps back in and wants to rehab the roundabout, we may be able to tie in all those fingers too. do as part of that project. It's still dollars that we'd have to fund, but it would be part of a lot bigger pile of money that it wouldn't cost as much, so. Just more or less, if we get a design and we know what we want to do, to then put our feelers out with NDOT and Washington County when they're doing these projects or when we're in these conversations and say, hey, can we add these pieces into it? So if they have a roundabout completely shut down, that'd be the time to do it anyway, or if they have traffic
Yeah.
diverted, to be able to get it and do it.
They talk about doing rehab of the roundabout.
They were gonna do it last year, but then the county wanted to push through, and so they kicked them out of, not bidding, but then when they got their, only got that one bid for $500,000 more, and they're gonna rebid it, but I haven't heard of the state wants back in to try to get that, but
What's rehab of that look like?
it's that, concrete panel repair, so they saw cut out chunks, they get rid of all the colored concrete crosswalks and the roundabout that are all falling apart, and just, where all those chunks are all missing, they patch it and just replace all that. They got one on both sides of the roundabout, kind of where the concrete is. Really, yeah, if you can get a agreed upon plan and then kind of a plan put together, then it's a lot easier to know to float these ideas out to the other partners and where we can, if we know for sure we want to do 7, yes, let's do 7, then, okay, then it's go right to the county and say, here's our new plan, this is what we want to do here, can we add this into the project?
But in addition to cutting the concrete, we dig down 3 or 4 feet, right? Talk to you about
I think we do that afterwards, and getting the concrete, just because you're gonna have to reshape the concrete to pitch it back towards those swales, so then you come back and dig that out. I don't know if they're gonna wanna do the whole, put the rock in, maybe that's something to ask them. I've asked them before to help with the landscape and they don't wanna touch it, so,
Well, no, I think with the landscape, we ought to ask the watershed.
yeah.
They get everything.
But I'm just saying, I don't think they're gonna wanna stop their project to dig out all those holes to put in the stormwater feature if they're just doing concrete repair, they're gonna rip the curb out and patch that back in, but.
Yeah, but we should be talking about the reporting to the county, as far as how far you dig down, we don't want to. I mean, does it have to be coordinated, or in your experience, is it 2 different steps?
I've always done it after the fact,
The digging or the concrete?
the digging.
Okay.
They kind of come in and do the cuts, remove the concrete, and it gives you a little more room, because you're not worried about that collapsing, kind of falling in. But it could be tough to coordinate that with the county, unless you just, I've had this happen before, where we've gone to the design engineer, if that's at the county or a sub-consultant, so this is what we want. Can you put this in your plan, we'll fund the change order, for that design, and then it becomes part of their project. Just have them do the package.
I guess I like the, what makes the most sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, still back to, if we know what we wanna do, then we float it out there, because I think we have our monthly meetings with the county and the state to talk about that stuff, so I mean, if we really are focusing on certain things that, we can try to pick off as part of their internal projects, well, might as well get some of that done.
Do we also start with the watershed district? Start those conversations as well? Related to 7?
Maybe they give us like 5 acres of credit for these little,
I think they should.
yeah.
These things possible.
So this is West Creek though, right? This watershed?
This is Country Lake.
It is.
So it goes out towards the water tower and that way.
Just remind them that they want to partner with us more. That's what they've said.
No, I'm sure they would like this idea. It's kind of like how Ryan said before, they don't like to fund the actual project, they like to fund the going above and beyond part of the project, or put signage up. I don't think too many people are gonna walk across the highway to look at the sign above. Unless you put it up on the trail side.
They can put it on their website. They can talk about it in the meeting.
No, it's definitely exact to my opinion, an idea that we have going, and we did wanna participate in the project.
So I think if, as consensus is to drop the 2 roundabouts down here, and then focus on Broadway, but then sequence that based on these different projects going on in the county and what the state might do, that would dictate how to sequence it, I would guess. So what do you need then? What are next steps? We have to commit to an actual plan on all these, probably?
I think the idea is to kind of see what we want for a plan there, is what I'm understanding.
So what we'd like council to do is say, this is what we want, all these areas to come up with, here's what our final plan looks like, and then we would ask Lucius to, what that cost would be to create construction plans and an artist rendering of these plans. And then from those plans, that's when we can insert those into other sheets. You know, and that's doing the roundabout, you would have that roundabout showing all the concrete they were in place, and then that's what get added in.
What is the amount that was put towards that parking lot, dollar amount? Do you know? Top of your head?
No, but I can look it up on my computer if you want me to dig
Well,
into it.
just, I mean, we're backing out some of these to get this thing a little bit more manageable, and to Dave's point about having it through roads or something
What
like
would,
that.
yeah, so what would that timing look like? If we're gonna line up with what the county and state might be doing already, what would that timing look like?
So the county's allegedly doing Broadway this summer 25.
Yeah.
But they don't, if the state's not involved, they're only going up to the pedestrian bridge. So that's kind of the divider, and the state takes over after the
okay, yeah.
pedestrian bridge. If the state would jump back in and want to do the roundabout at the same time, then that's when you could get that roundabout.
We don't expect that that's gonna happen this next year, do we?
They were trying to get plans together last March, April, to try to get in and bid with Washington County, and they just ran out of time because the county wanted to bid it out. But that's an email or a phone call to Dimitri and see if we're at this, and see if, are you guys still planning on doing this or not doing this?
I think we're overall on the right track with the plans. My heartburn comes on fitting it in a time frame for either 2025 or 2026, given if, you know, if we're currently sitting at 145,000 a year, even if you were to, if take 7th Street off for a moment, if we were going to just take Lake Street and say we were gonna combine, you know, 2025 and 2026, and if we were gonna front load that into 2025, if the state, for example, were going to come in and do that roundabout, that's still an additional 300,000, depending on maybe something that comes out with the parking lot. So, I don't know, there's some additional push there from what's in the 10-year plan that, I don't know, we always like these projects individually, but then when we see the whole, everything baked in together in the final effect, that's always where the challenge comes in, so.
I gotta believe that parking lot's probably a pretty good chunk of that, $500,000. And even if, I mean, Lake Street, Broadway, I mean, that project is so big, you can even sequence that, I think, over a couple of years.
That's what I would recommend is, maybe, I
I
don't
mean,
know,
like, get the, like, Lucius was saying, start with the street.
yeah, start with the components of it.
And I think that we might work better with Washington County coming in. So I think if we could strategically look at the 4 projects, mostly I think 7th and Lake Street, and then have Dave look at strategically like what could Washington County, what would be realistic to put within that project? What would make sense? So it wouldn't be like all of Lake Street and Broadway getting redone, but strategically out of those, would it just be the medians? What would make sense?
See, the other part of that is, I mean, irrigation, I'm sure that space is a significant part of it, so, you know, how can we phase that, or probably can't, I would guess, right? You work on the irrigation of Lake and Broadway.
Yeah, I mean, Lake and Broadway, a lot of it's gonna be out of the street. I mean, it all works, Lake and Broadway, it all works, it's just manually, it needs to probably run wires and get it all. I mean, yeah, we're like 12th is a full redo.
Well, it says irrigation's not showing major rework is required. So I mean, what part of that estimate is programming the wires, emitters,
At Lake Street Broadway, he has $182,500.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Maybe that's a little high, but I was just assuming that, you know, the lines might have to come out and pull in new lines and trying to figure out where the wires went and they hardly ever follow plan. Irrigation, how do you get them back under the street? You have to find those sleeves and run that, so, because we're not planning on pulling up concrete to run wires and lines underneath, so just finding them and just anticipating that it's a pretty big to-do.
Is there, if I'm tracking the conversation, if we have some motivation to time these projects when Washington County or MnDOT's already doing work, if there's some overall appetite of, yes, let's do as much as we can, as soon as we can, because so much of that $645,000 for Lake Street is irrigation modification, it's a third of the cost, right? Over a third the cost? Is there a plan modification that makes the irrigation not necessary, that maybe we should consider an alternate design? Where you've got a different design project and something that is smaller in budget? I'd have to go back to the picture of
You need the irrigation.
what would that look
You
like?
need the irrigation regardless because you have any methods. So regardless, your irrigation's gonna have to always run in every one of those zones. It goes from second to second both ways, so your irrigation has to be operational. It's the zones that, so there'll be a valve that'll go off and, you know, do this landscaping, or a valve that'll go off, and those are the ones that haven't worked for so long. It's trying to either retrace those wires or pull new wires through and then reprogramming your entire controller, because the controller has 56 zones and like 9 of them were just the ones that run the irrigation. They just kept whittling it down and finding wires to make.
So really, it's not so much can irrigation be smaller, but it's like, if we want irrigation, here's the number. It's more of a yes, no, than a range. So I'm hearing kind of.
The only thing that would make it smaller is those raised curb planters. If we're not planting in those other than trees, does that warrant a zone? I don't know where the hanging baskets are in relation to those. Remember that from the city visit? So maybe there is a little reduction, like if those weren't included.
How much is the parking lot?
Parking lot, it's tied into several other items, but I'm guessing it's probably 50,000. By the time, because you gotta dig that out, backfill it with the aggregate and then the tuner, so it kind of wanders through several items, but. That doesn't irrigate it, so.
I wanted you to say that was 125,000. It's easier to pull out.
But I am wondering if that irrigation number is high though, if those lines are good, if it really is just replacing valves and the controller wire.
Yeah, I would.
But it
I would say if I-35 to 12 is estimated at 121.5, that Lake Street wouldn't be over that. Because that's installing all brand new and everything.
Oh, yeah.
This one would be that you have the main lines, it'd be replacing your solenoids and then making sure your zone, yeah, you're probably missing heads or trip lines and stuff like that, but.
Well, and maybe I'm pulling that question out of sequence a little bit. Maybe part of the next step is to go back and look at that further of what that number, kind of what the next iteration of that number might be, if we're showing some interest of Lake Street sooner rather than later.
It's such a hard number. I mean, it may be down to that 121, but I mean, you don't know until you start going through it. it could be as simple as like how we turned on 19 and everything just fired off. You may be able to find wire, hook it up and something starts working, but you could also have to go all the way to the irrigation box and pull 300-foot of wire through conduits under the road and, you know, you get some wire. So you're better, I mean, like you said, they all manually turn on, but that means that the wire's dead, so, or the valve is silenced, it could be solenoid or it could be just a dead wire across. It's a tough one, I mean, it's just buried and unknown, you can't see what the problem is. Sometimes it's easier, like 12, for you to say, nothing works, let's just put new stuff in. Because then it's easier than trying to put stuff together. But this one, you know it works, because we're running hanging baskets, so I mean, it's getting to both sides of the city, so you really don't wanna give up on that, because you don't have any leaks, everything's working, it's just somebody zones it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't suggest that we back off the hanging baskets. I think they're a nice design element that people really like.
Do cities bond for this kind of stuff? I mean, do you just get it all done, let's say you put budget $2 million, try to keep it there, and put that with the bond, the North Shore loan, the treatment of the bond, and try to do it, just get it all done, and you're $1 million and you're done with it, because if this thing is phased out, by the time you're halfway through it, you could be, you know, trying to do some real replacement on the first part of the project, but just throwing out there, I don't know what rates are, have we gone on the North Shore thing, do we know where we're at on that?
We're at, got an update from Kevin recently.
And again, that might be a little fast timeline, because here we are, you know, going into November, and we want to do this next summer, but if it's a way to do it, if you're gonna disrupt Broadway, and the county's gonna go through there and do that,
Get
just,
it done.
it'd be nice to just get it done.
I don't see how we could possibly change the design at all to make it any cheaper. You know, it's,
You're gonna have to do it.
Yeah, I think your project will change the cost too if you bid every single one of them all versus, I think Lucius is looking at, if you just did this project, and just did this, I mean, if you put that, all of it as one project, you're gonna get a lot more favorable bids because that's
Bigger
a
job.
project, right? Not a couple day project, it's you're there for
in
a
the
month.
meantime, we can see what Washington County will do and what watershed district and all of them.
So what are our follow-ups?
Maybe the county, that's right, maybe the county, if we do decide that we're willing to push that project more late, so I don't know what's planned, if it's planned, if they're gonna do it after the 4th, but even later, we've been having some nice falls, and maybe it's more of a late summer, so we have more time, I guess, more of a runway to get to what we wanna do on design and all.
I think we're smarter to do it late summer, early fall versus right away in the summer.
For planting.
Get the plantings in and get them irrigated and go dormant for the winter and start back up to next year. Give them a good chance to go right away in the hot summer, even if you're irrigating, you just, brand new plants are just hammering on.
The other issue though, with our budget set at the top number, and then they throw this $1 million of bonding, that's gonna kind of throw us off there too.
Yeah, that could be problematic. And Kevin's position was that, you know, with where we're sitting right now with 145 levied over the next 5 years, that if we've got to increase that 145 for this next year, we could look to fund 211, the capital improvement. And then we're just gonna have to work it out in future budgets, but
Yeah, because
bonding might be a challenge because we already are set at that.
service.
Yeah, would 145,000 take care of the debt service on $1 million bucks?
Yeah,
It should.
it really should, because you could run that over, hey, for 20 years,
Yeah.
even 10 years, I mean, 145.
Should cover that.
I just got an email out to Kevin to ask him to send us some information and options on that to come through, so.
It's real interesting to take that.
Yeah, also depends on what else he
About
has.
about 1.5 million. It is if you can go.
It'd be good to look at what else is included in that
yeah,
next
but-
bond.
No, I'm not arguing,
Fit or
I just said, that's about what it became, for sure.
Yeah. I think it was bonds were,
Oh, you could, yeah, you could get it. Absolutely.
Be interesting to look at that deed grant too and see if there's some teeth behind that. We sent over, maybe that's,
It does make sense if you could get favorable bidding and get, like you just said, getting everything all done at one time. And
just like,
everything,
just like doing the parking lot versus having it part of a,
yeah,
10,000 ton project, it's gonna be a lot different price.
So when we say do everything, are we referring to 7th Street and Lake Street? And then hold off on the 19th and the freeway side? Or are we, no, everything?
I think we're just kind of throwing everything, but if we could maybe say, okay, let's try not to spend any more than $1 million. Like, so if we're at 1.4, we dropped out 200-some-thousand there, so now we're at 1.2. If there's a way with irrigation coming down, the parking lot coming out, we can get it at $1 million, or they're right somewhere that close, I'd be comfortable with that.
And do everything, are you including
Everything,
the
yeah,
roundabouts
your
too?
question, yes, not the two in the south, not the
Okay.
two down here, but
So
everyone.
these four,
These 4?
yeah.
I think the question is just making sure that there's room in that issuance for that increase, and then just making sure, I mean, the incremental increase to debt service isn't going to be a killer, but just making sure that that is all included.
Do we need?
What?
Did you go to the meeting?
Probably more than one.
So, we had a workshop planned for November, so next November, so what would you like back for that? Do we need another meeting, or do we want to say we like what this is, the workshop is, we want to look at what that would cost for him to put a plan set together and artist renderings? I guess, where is the council sitting, or do we want to talk through this again in November? Look at the cost again and work with Kevin and talk this through. We have one more reserve, so we can definitely meet again and talk about whatever we'd like to talk about, or
What was the plan for the next meeting?
this one was kind of the hybrid of, we're kind of gonna have two options and then try to narrow down the one and then come down with cost, but you guys
It's the
really
everything
got to know
option.
what you like right off the bat, so we kind of
Right, okay.
skipped a step and got to the pricing of what the group kind of preferred.
I think it might make sense for our next, so let's do a November workshop, but let's have Kevin here and work through the finance, what are the different finance options? Because that might end up driving scope. And I think it'd be helpful to have you here just to provide the guidance of, if we decide we need to break it into some smaller pieces, what might that look
yeah,
like?
the architect should be able to handle what the interest rates would be too,
Right.
on the bond, so.
Well, and Kevin's already, I think there's already a little bit of legwork on what that next bond issuance looks like and what's bundled into that.
By that time, I should have an update on that deed grant, see if that is a possibility or something we can actually apply for at the timing of that. I think they said they let them know already in January, didn't they?
They did, yeah. Had a general notification.
And in the meantime, I can reach out to the county and the state and just get their feeling of an appetite of, you know, what we would be willing to do. I mean, if we do the full project, then we might want to keep all that in there because that would be part of that full project versus having them piece it out, but I will talk to those two and see if the state's planning on doing anything at the roundabout, and then Washington County would be willing to do or not do as part of their project.
If the state isn't doing anything as part of the roundabout, I'm okay, I mean, is the thought, hold on the Lake Street component until future year, or is the thought, just get it done while the county's doing all the work on Lake Street? Broadway, I'm sorry.
I guess that's up to you. It'd be nice if the state went through and did, the state and the county went through and did everything, we came right behind them and did all the landscaping and everything was done instead of,
Right, I would agree with that. But if Dimitri says, no, we're not, then we punted that till 2026, do we hold? And my only thought on, it gives us a little bit of additional budget wiggle room on if it's just the proximity of it being 2025 that Kevin might have some heartburn over. Kevin, I mean, ultimately, Kevin is going to anticipate our heartburn, so we think, so,
I can't wait to tell him what we decided while he wasn't here. It's gonna be amazing.
Great kid. He's gonna do whatever we want to do, but I think he will anticipate what our
Well, let's
November selves feel about those numbers.
find out, let's find out what the state's gonna do.
In the meantime, no design changes or iterations. I mean, we were keeping that in reserve too in case it was like, no, let's just turf everything. Or, it doesn't seem like that's really in anybody's mind though on this project.
Well, we thinking about turfing the roundabouts.
Down there,
Yeah.
down here, I guess, but, fine with
I think
focus.
if you're gonna end up wanting to turf it, that's a public works job. Public works can go in there and rip all that out and till it up and.
I'm just thinking, if we're trying to get down to $1 million, like if we're going down that avenue, I don't see us getting down to $1 million and including those roundabouts.
No.
No, I don't,
Blake wasn't.
I wasn't.
No, I know, so I mean, is that what we're, I mean, I don't want you to do any more work on those roundabouts.
Yeah, right.
We're just gonna go grass.
Sure.
Or just leave them.
Or just leave them.
Yeah.
For a while, yeah.
Take those out of the, we can go through.
Really just start plugging in some of those missing in those rings and kind of slow rebuild it. Totally an option. And that's why that third workshop was kind of originally planned, was just to react and modify, revise based on this conversation.
We did so well, Lucius, that we just.
Awesome.
Yeah, that-
And clear guidance. That helps.
I mean, personally, I would, when it comes to this, the south roundabouts on 97, I would, rather than making the decision that we don't like the cost of the rebuild and we're gonna just turf it, it's, in my opinion, I'd be okay punting that decision until we get through these projects and then decide, bring those costs back and then decide, okay, do we redesign or do we turf it?
Sure.
I don't know if we need to lock in on that right now.
Yeah, because this is really just setting kind of the palette for it. It's like, oh yeah, shelve it for a year, however, come back and you got something. So
Is there any ability to get a more hard number on the irrigation piece of it? Because that seems like that doesn't really, not 100%, but maybe not till you tear into it, right? I don't know.
I can try to,
look at it.
well,
Everything's blown out, so you really can't test things, right?
but I can give a couple contractors just a roundabout of what's going on and what they think it would take to diagnose and then, worst case scenario type of deal. We kind of know, my staff knows everything that's going on, so probably I want them to speak with Peterson's an irrigation doctor, one of these groups that kind of do it all the time and maybe he can give us a better estimated number. It may come back right at what we just had, or it may be like, I know it's only 40 grand. That would be a big difference, so.
Right. You just gotta make sure you cover everyone, it's gonna be.
Well, yeah, I don't wanna guess wrong and then say, oh, by the way, it's 100 grand more than, I had green news, but now I have bad news. Yeah, I don't wanna do that either, so conservative to a point, but also not maybe.
Let's hear the bad news now.
All right. Is that a plan? Bring it back November workshop with Kevin, updating, see how it rolls into the plan. Good? Okay. Thank you, very helpful.
Yeah, thanks for your hard work. Yeah, thanks for the conversation, the feedback. Like I said, I've gotten nowhere fast, where it's like, oh, try it again. Try this idea, try that idea, so.
Nice work. All right, should we move on to our next agenda? It's landscaping day. Shade tree nuisance ordinance, Dave, this one's yours as well.
Sure is. So earlier this spring, we had, I think it was even a discussion, I know we talked about all the ash trees dying and that the city really didn't have any ordinances or policies at all. Our only ordinance for nuisance trees, I think, points to U of M 1979 document to look and see if your trees has a nuisance precedent. So with the help from Amanda and myself, we kind of researched, found a League of Minnesota Cities ordinance, and by searching through about 20 or 30 different cities that all are running about the same identical nuisance ordinance. The only really change we had is most of the ordinances spell out emerald ash borer and Dutch elm and specific ones where we just kind of tied it in that anytime the DNR or the U of M say that this is a nuisance, want that ordinance will automatically grab instead of us having to open this back up and put that in. Ordinance also gives the city the ability to claim a public nuisance if a property owner has a infested tree and they're refusing to cut it down and it's causing a public safety concern. We can tell them they need to do it, or we can abate and take it down and charge it to their property tax, or give them payment plans and that kind of stuff. That it gives future code enforcement that ability, although we never really had that before, to have some teeth. Typically, tree law is the same if it's on private property and you have to get involved, but at least in the case of if it's a pest that we can have some time to be able to tell people we need to take a tree. It also designates a city forester. We used to have a city forester here. We had a contract going out. I'm trying to convince a couple of my guys to be certified tree inspectors, which would be super helpful if we had 2 or 3 of them that would go and take that test and be around to be able to, anytime when we get phone calls from residents too, and hey, can you come look at my tree? Right now, we kind of send them to a tree company who has our person will look at it, but it'd be nice to have that ability in-house. It spells it all out. Right now, we don't have one. I mean, we can always contract out. In the meantime, but I'm hoping over the winter we'll get a couple of staff members that will be certified. But otherwise, it's a lot of boilerplate stuff that kind of covers us as reviewed by Amanda and put an ordinance following, and also adds it to a public nuisance, and then also amends the old nuisance, the tree press, or tree pest ordinance. We're looking for discussion, or the hope would be to bring, if you have any comments, or if everything was good, to bring it back to the November 12th meeting to adopt. You get it back quick enough for the 28th, but we're missing this in the tree policy we found that when we were trying to get grant funding for emerald ash borer, it's one of the first things on the application is, do you have a ordinance and do you have a policy? We're missing both, so it'd be helpful to get this in. Talking with Brian at Bolton Mink, they're hearing that there's possibly going to be something coming out in November for funding for emerald ash borer, so if we can just line up and the grant opens and we can line up those.
Is that state grant?
He hears from the DNR, there's also federal money floating around too. Some of it's just straight grant money and some of it's a match, which we have that $25,000 plugged in for 2025, which sometimes is better we'll spend our 25 if you give us 25 too. So yeah, those 2 options. We're really, looking for a comment if there's something that you see that's missing, something that you think is too much, just overall comments.
Yeah, since I read through it, it's kind of when we did the code enforcement, and we just want, I guess, called the Barney Fifer around people's backyards.
Yeah, that was it. But I think it's necessary.
Well, policy is necessary, just, is there, do Amanda feel like we're overreaching when it comes to private property? I mean, there needs to be some means and teeth, but at what point do we decide? I mean, you walk around town and you can see a lot of trees that are dead or half dead. I mean, at what point does this become, neighbor A's complain about neighbor B's dead tree, and we're getting in the middle of neighbors fighting? How do you sift through that?
And some of this, it's just if a tree is endangering the neighbor or something, wasn't it part of the ordinance I read about?
And this one's just specifically about infestation with pests. So if somebody has a dying maple tree, this one covers it. That would be for the neighbors to figure out. This is, hey, you looked at your tree as emerald ash borer, it's gonna die. It needs to come down.
Correct, but with the emerald ash borer, you, I mean, treated, well, treated, I treated mine, but I mean, you know that the emerald ash borer is there before the top is starting to die, or is it already like, okay, the ground is dying because the emerald was here last year?
Yeah, it was here about 3 years ago.
3 years ago, even better.
So.
So you were past the infestation point already at this point?
So usually about a year, 2 or 3, you'll see the canopy loss. You know, so then that's where we're at right now. So it basically came 3 years ago and wiped out all the ashes. So there, by now, there's really, once you notice it now, it's too late.
So is the scope of this all trees, or is the scope of this trees that are a danger to the public and trees that are in the right of way?
So the first part is that we manage all the trees in the public areas in the right of way. And then lower down, it says if we see, trying to find where it is.
Trying to differentiate between the tree that's, you know, in the right of way in the front yard versus the tree that's in the backyard that, you know, middle of the lot, not impacting another
Well, so I feel like this ordinance is talking about two different things though. It's not about, hey, your tree's dead and it's a danger to my family. It's, hey, your tree is infested or, you know, oak wilt.
because it exists.
And so you either need to spray it or we're gonna come spray it for you. It's not about dead tree falling down. In my reading. Am I tracking correctly?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to get in the middle of other homeowner disputes of my tree branch is hanging in yours or this tree is dying. It's more sick. Right now, ash borer is too far gone on that. Let's say the new maple syrup eating bug comes and we know it's coming and you can spray for it, right? And that's when you say, hey, property owner, our certified arborist or our tree inspector has noticed that your tree's infested. We need, you have 30 days to treat that. And if they refuse, then that would give the city the teeth to say, we're gonna hire a contractor to spray this.
Yeah.
The ash borer is we're kind of past the ash borer. Unfortunately, we're on the other side of that. This is more setting up for future infestations of being your.
So in these infestations, this is a question of ignorance. Do we have 30 days? Think of your example, hey, you've got 30 days to spray, or is it like a week and it's too late? I don't know.
That's what I think the original ordinance or one of them says it's like, you have 5 business days to respond. And I think Amanda was more like, hey, that's a little, enough that people are gone or if, you know, people that have time to line stuff up. So if anything, that might be your wiggle room if you want it stricter. Or I guess that part, I don't know how quick you want that, have that response. And I don't know how fast, to your point, I don't know either. The next one that comes through is if you have a matter of days to get that treated or not.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking with this ordinance, would it behoove us to have a policy or standard operating procedure where it's like, okay, the sugary maple bug is coming and we're pushing out, communications to our residents saying, hey, make a plan to get your tree sprayed or treated, whatever the case is, or, we're gonna spray by June 15th, or whatever. I don't know, I just think the policy is 30 days. If it's not treated within 7 days, well, then you're gonna come through and spray a tree that's already smoked and charge me for it. You know what I mean? So it's just, it's always challenging when we get involved in private property.
So
Yes.
that's the next thing we're gonna talk about is the tree policy too, so that you may be able to, in the future, alter that, or you can add that in at the policy, that if something is coming, then that triggers something versus in your ordinance. I don't know where you wanna place, but.
It's hard, we have residents that don't vaccinate their kids, so
Right.
getting them to treat a tree proactively That's a big move from where we are today of just policy from a governance standpoint, right? And so then to do the education on here's what the tree is, and here's what we're gonna do to your tree, and here's, potential impact, it could just get really messy really fast. It's the kind of thing where speed is not helpful. Is speed necessary here, or is it unknown?
What do you mean speed?
The speed of response. You're talking about a kind of an escalated, something that has not a 30-day notice, but it's a much shorter window. In the tree epidemic world, is that type of speed of response generally necessary, or?
Lucius has been sitting here.
I'm so glad you're over here.
He's probably just-
Please
these
pipe
guys
up.
don't even know what I'm talking about.
I don't. It's 4 months, sir.
With the emerald ash borer, usually by the time you saw it, it wasn't too late. I mean, it just, by the time you see the flaking, it's like next season it's gonna die, so I don't know that spraying it fast was gonna change that outcome.
But one thing about the ash borer thing, this stuff's been talked about for the last 5 or 6 years, so that we knew it was coming, so if you wanted to treat your tree, you could, and I think it's part of the education part of it too. So can you make it mandatory? I don't know.
Because it wasn't guaranteed, or
That was part of
lost all of
it.
mine, treated them, and then 2 years
I
later.
know they tried it with the elm trees too, they didn't either. So, but the education thing,
I'm comfortable with a policy as it relates to our trees, and I like the idea of including an education component on there. And, know that we're gonna have a forester, ideally that forester is providing some means of education and keeping people aware. I'm not too excited about the idea of abatement around vaccine.
Tree vaccination.
Tree vaccination, because, at the end of the day, if I don't take care of my trees and I let them die, I'm either gonna have to spend the money to cut them down or sell my house at a loss because the buyer's gonna have to do it. It's just, at the end of the day, I'm still financially responsible.
Yeah.
So can we have an ordinance without that private property piece of it, still be eligible for grants?
I guess your problem, I guess the problem with that is, that's fine that you want your trees to die, but what if, by you not spraying your tree, is now kills 3 of your neighbor's trees, because it's red.
He also didn't vaccinate his kid against tuberculosis, and we've got the MEO universally, but same thing, right?
I think, that's why I think that it's probably is in there and you want it in there, just because you're trying to protect the entire canopy of your city, so if one person refuses to and says, well, I don't care if my tree does, well, we actually care if the other 1,000 in your neighborhood don't.
The problem is the by the time it's here, it's too late.
And it's also encompassing not just that one, but like others that come too. I think it's better to have than to not have, because they don't have to abate,
Can the triggering of an abatement process be triggered? Can we have it in our policy that council may permit? And then make it situational, that before we were to make this effort, that council has information provided to us, we know what the risk is, we know what it is that we're doing, and we can give direct guidance. That lets us have it in our language that council may permit, but it's not a required and doesn't.
Or is it complaint-based? Is it a neighbor complaint? Instead of us just going through backyards and saying, well, that tree's, you gotta do something, I feel good, because then it does affect, if it affects your neighbor, like, if you have a diseased tree, to your point, well, likely that my tree can be or not, or it does fall down and damages someone's property, so maybe it has to be, any complaint based, would that be a little easier to stomach?
Yeah, but then you're back into. We're trying to inventory trees in town so we know who's susceptible to that sugar-eating bug.
The hope is that when we get the grant, is that those dollars are gonna spend more on the tree inventory off the bat than cutting down the ash trees, just to get a grasp of what we have here.
To me, to have a policy where it's, You gotta know it's a challenge.
Yeah. And then typically, I've seen a lot of those grants that have expired in the past, and that's kind of like your step one of, you probably should have an idea of what you have, not only to have a count of how many ash trees you have that you're gonna have to try to take care of, but number two of, in the future, there's that, back to the sugar maple, okay, you'll be able to, on GIS, pull it up and say, here's all of our maple trees. You know, and know where you're gonna be going, because right now, I don't clue.
It would have to be complete fixes. I just want us to be really careful, because it's not us that'll be enforcing this.
I would agree, yeah.
You know, we can set the policy with the best intentions, but we won't be the ones most likely that are carrying it out.
So speak with Amanda and see if there's somehow we can put something in that pavement that,
Because is the policy usually, the enforcement portion of the policy, is that usually triggered by what is going to be the next emerald ash borer? Is it more of a, here is a new tree epidemic that is coming around the corner and we're on the front end of it? And is there time, I mean, I know you don't know what this looks like right now, what the timeline.
we're considering it a public nuisance, basically.
Yeah,
So it falls right into that whole public nuisance code. So this drops itself right in there, so it's, you know, it follows those steps. If somebody determines something a public nuisance, and you follow those steps that are laid out in the code.
yeah. The part I get nervous on of making it complaint-based is we know we have neighbors right now that kind of weaponize our code against their neighbors and, you know, kind of depends on your aptitude to be subject to this, kind of depends on how much your neighbor dislikes you or how noisy your neighbor is on complaining, and that's what makes my hesitance. And it's something like, it's a long enforcement road from where we are today and so many other things. That's the part I'm struggling with.
Well, my biggest concern is, it's one thing you got a fridge sitting there, it's not going anywhere.
Right.
But if it's a bug coming through, I mean, timing is of the essence. And I don't want to find $1,200 to spray my tree when the bug was here 6 weeks ago. And that's where I think it's very different than our standard garbage in the backyard. So tell them to fix it.
Thanks.
I think we need some sort of
Having,
ordinance. There's some sticky.
heavy lean towards education. I mean, we know what our community's reaction was to COVID and mandates from any level of government of this is what's recommended for public health, and it didn't go so great. Or we didn't, wasn't one of the more popular positions anybody in government authority had to take. And that was over people, this is trees. That's how.
I just go back to that, every city that I looked at have is identical. I mean, so I think it's set up that way, and I think your next pest that comes through, you're gonna know that, say it's coming from the East Coast or the West Coast, you're gonna know that you gotta get it right away. This is, once it gets found, and then that might even fall into the emergency situations where as soon as it's spotted, we're abating right away. We're not waiting to let you get 3 quotes and figure out who's gonna do it. Or you're gonna get one that says, you know, if it's infested, as long as you spray within, or treat your tree within 2 months, you're fine. That's the part, I don't think you or I know what that next one's gonna be. But I think you're probably gonna have to have some type of abatement in there just to be able to take care of it without waiting too long.
Yeah, I like the idea of protecting our trees. Truly I do. Remember you brought it up last spring, I told you this, it's like you can't go anywhere without seeing a dead tree around. I guess the other part for me is just think about what does that cost? I mean, we hear all the time from you know, our residents about some of the decisions we make and the associated cost. I mean, if, right, you know, newer developments don't have quite the tree coverage that some of the older parts of the city have, but you can end up really, really quick. Does our policy address that? Or is there any other policy?
Our
address
policy
that?
doesn't address that, but I think I brought up last month or sometime that, you know, that's another avenue the city can go down to is hire, or, you know, go on RFP for a preferred contractor that will.
No, I'm thinking about your last example where we know something's coming.
Yeah,
And so as emergency management, we might just choose to spray all trees that are gonna be affected.
yeah.
And charge the homeowners for it. But like, you know, so does our policy address in that situation, does our policy address how those homeowners who are affected financially are gonna be held responsible? Are they gonna have a 12-month window to pay it on the property taxes, or?
I think that just goes to your abatement. I don't know exactly what the abatement policy is.
I guess I'd like to get for the final version.
I guess I would assume this is like anything else. If you have to pay your water bill and you say I can only afford $10 a month for the next 2 years, they would have planned property damage and, you know, when we coop off a streetlight, we're getting paid, can't use it all for streetlights that have not covered.
So it's probably palatable to most homeowners.
And if it's, I mean, if it's a citywide epidemic coming, the city's just gonna spray everything, that's, the taxpayers are just gonna end up paying it on the other end anyway. I mean, that, if you have to spray the whole entire city there.
That's the thing, is it worth the abatement process, if you just take it on? Rather
You just
than
don't know
doing
what the
individual
next-
chargebacks, you just do it as a general fund.
Yeah, because in that argument though, he had 3 trees, I only have 1, this guy's
yeah,
got
you're
10,
right.
I don't know. You can see some issues there.
So Dave, are you saying that your research I mean, we're an anomaly here, we're rare that we don't have a policy that says pretty much exactly that?
Every city that I looked at had this exact
Really?
ordinance.
Yeah.
The only
So
thing
every
was just
city, so it's not just like the cities that have an ordinance, this is what they have, it's most cities have the ordinance.
have this exact ordinance.
Oh, interesting. So that, yeah,
It's a big Minnesota city template.
huh,
And like, I think some people call city forester the tree inspector, or, you know, they insert different names, but I mean, pretty much verbatim, it's identical. The only thing that we have, like I said earlier, we had added that we list out the 3 that are there, but then I just added that one that if anything else comes, a tree pest of an epidemic level is defined by Minnesota statute. That added that in, that you don't have to declare another one for the next one. But otherwise, it's like identical. I mean, I challenge you to find another one if you want to.
yeah.
Because I was looking for just different ideas, and every one you pull up is exactly.
So I guess the bigger point is, you would think if this was an issue with other communities and residents being upset, we would have heard about it. Like maybe there is an issue, but if this is in place and it's not making the local news that the local city's making me do X to a tree, maybe it's not that big of an issue.
And probably like everything, it's the approach to the enforcement side, should you give for sure up.
If it needed some kind of modification along the way. It's something to work on for sure, we've got plenty of issues, but it's all done.
So do we go back to as written?
Sure. I would guess most of those cities have put those in effect for the last 2 or 3 years, and it's not been
Challenge,
Modified.
It hasn't been used yet, so.
That could be true.
Sounds good.
Mine too.
On to tree maintenance policy?
So this is the spin-off of the ordinance where this is something we can modify on a annual, monthly, anytime basis. It's, you know, if we want to add stuff in about education, or if pests are coming, or if something different that we want to add in our maintenance policy. But it also defines out that we're taking ownership of all of the right-of-way trees, all the public spaces. We get the good ones and the bad ones. And also saying that we don't want trees in the right-of-way, so we cut trees down, we're not putting things back. I tried to have Amanda try to let me sneak in there that if, they're in the right-of-way, we didn't plant them, so they're your problem, but she won't do that. But it's basically spelling out how we maintain our trees that are in the, how we expect to maintain our trees in the right of way and in public spaces, and hopefully kind of a guideline to property owners to move up pruning, and that it kind of be a good neighbor to how you maintain your trees as well. It's basically just stepping through how we, maintain trees, and then it also says that the tree replacement, will evaluate on a case by case. Typically, if it's in the right of way, they won't go back. We'll run into situations where it's maybe not in the right of way, but it's a public hazard that we may cut down and we may put it back. It all depends on a lot of those will be case by case of how we replace it. This goes into that community engagement too. Education programs that we offer to inform community about importance of trees, proper care practices, and benefits of forestry. And that's part of that where we can put stuff out on Facebook or on the city website about stuff that's coming up, or if we hear about be on the lookout for sugar maple logging on that. And we also just tell people that to let us know if there's a tree that doesn't look good. So it's not a lot, it's more or less just, it's basically that first part of that, we're taking authority of the right-of-way trees. And then it's never been in policy or an ordinance that actually spells out that right-of-way trees are ours. And we have to at least account for that, which also then goes into the funding for grants that we can claim all those trees as ours. A lot of the grants are just for public entities to take down public trees. And right now our policies or ordinances don't say that those are ours. Yeah. So we get all the dead ones, but we get the live ones too. So it actually helps us with some teeth, because you have ones that are right up against the curb that are at horrible sight distance, and that you'll get fought on that it's my tree when it's alive, but when it's dying, then I'm gonna tell you and say it's gonna be taken out. So this way, at least, if we're taking them all, then we have that authority to take them all too. Even if it's a living tree that's wrecking the sidewalk or wrecking the road, that we have that authority as well. Not to say the rest of it's fluff, but a lot of it is, it's mostly that authority saying that that's where we're claiming ownership of that right-of-way trees.
Any points of feedback on this? Seems like necessary, and step one is claiming the trees. Any feedback, anything anyone will change? Retreat out, retreat out.
I wore you down.
No, I think the challenge is gonna be on funding the takedown of the disease ones, and that's the next step, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully grants come available, we can get some funding, and we're starting off with a massive problem, just driving around town, there's a lot of them.
But a lot of these non-residents are taking them down. I mean, I see trucks all the time.
Yeah.
Down to my yard.
All right. It's getting late, I need to belabor the topic if it's good.
No, I'm
Come
good.
back for approval? Okay.
Good.
Perfect. Let's take a spin through future work session items and pending topics.
Thank you, Mayor. You guys are familiar with the list that Christina started to kind of keep track of where different concepts and ideas are going and where they were in process. As we've kind of started through this transition period that we're in, department heads and I have talked a little bit about that and kind of pared it down to items that we would suggest we put our current focus on and those that we would suggest that we make future focus. So page 1 of that handout that I provided to you are items that are current focus and will continue to be bringing forward here and working through in earnest as we're in this transition period. I ran through this with Mayor Bain and Councilmember Erickson last week as well. A couple of these are going to be coming up for a presentation for you at council meetings in the next week actually. But to touch on them quickly, the UTV, ATV / golf course ordinance. Rick and I have continued to work on that. Concern right now is just legal's very backed up. And before we bring these ordinances forward for your consideration, we need to have legal go through them as well. We've started with the draft of the LMC, the league's model ordinance, but obviously with some of the asks that council worked through at a work session, we need to modify that. So that's where we really need to make sure that we're getting legal involved. So Rick and I are continuing to work on that, but we suspect that given workloads right now and this transition, it'll be early 2025 that we bring that forward for full consideration. But we know it's a priority because our residents have been very vocal about it. And Wyoming residents have too. Public safety funds discussions and policy, that is continuing and that is going to be ongoing. That is not going to pause, obviously. Dave is going to be bringing back the Bells Park grant next week for your further consideration. So that's obviously going to continue moving forward. We know that's an important initiative for the city here, for our residents. Abby continues to work on local affordable housing funds. That will not be pausing because again, that's an important initiative, as is the Veterans Memorial. She touched on that last week at the council meeting. Airport lease rates and the airport use standard policy development. This is obviously an item that we need to get out there and working on. Amanda is working on some checklists for that right now, but again, Amanda is pretty buried. So we're just asking for a little bit of grace as we continue to move that forward, but maybe not quite as quickly as we had originally anticipated. Dave just talked to you about the trees, so that's clearly ongoing. We'll be bringing that forward for consideration and approval on November 12th. And cannabis is obviously continuing to move forward. Some updates from the state and the Office of Cannabis Management is that they don't envision issuing any licenses until at least 2026 now because of delays in how their social equity applicant licensing program has rolled out. So they're working through those issues. So while it's important we get some zoning ordinances in place, I don't think we're quite as up against the wire as we were previously. But Amanda's been working on that diligently, so we're going to keep that rolling. And then the snow removal policy. This is one that I think it comes up probably every year. So I think what we need to do is we need to bring it back to council at a workshop or as a discussion item, just so we can get some really clear parameters on what we would like to see in that policy development. Maybe we'll have a winter like next winter and it's not gonna be an issue. But we know it's been a priority for council, so I'd like to kind of get an idea of when you guys would like to see this brought back for a little bit further discussion. Use that, workshop in November, which we'll be discussing medians again in finance. Yeah, great. But we also have a public hearing with the folks from Met Council for the Interceptor project at that workshop as well. So we're going to have a couple items on there that you guys are going to be working through, although the Met Council, we're just really going to be an audience for that. But would you like to see that at an actual workshop? Because I know it's kind of a robust topic. Or could we slate it in as a discussion item at a council meeting? What would be your preference?
I'd rather workshop myself.
I think I prefer a workshop.
Okay, I agree. I prefer workshops in general. I just think it's a better environment for really working through those. So the next page then is items that were on the list, and we are suggesting we kind of push pause on and make these future focuses, not quite as urgent or under the gun as the items on the first page are. The special event permits, I'm just asking that we move that into next year. I was working under very specific direction on that one to formulate this ordinance specific to what Scandia and Lake Elmo had in place, and I don't think that's the appropriate direction for our city to be moving with that ordinance. So that's gonna take me some time to go back and kind of reformulate what I'm gonna propose. So I just ask that we get the thumbs up to kind of put pause on that, push pause on that, and bring that back to council later in the season in 2025, hopefully after a new city administrator is seated. The Airbnb Verbo rental inspection program. That's gonna kind of be a team effort. Community development right now is just not able to take on the development of that program and those ordinances. And again, that's gonna require a lot of counsel from legal. So it just isn't feasible for us to move that one forward right now. I started gathering some data on that. So we've got some movement on that, but it's just, that's gonna be a really time-consuming one.
So on that, just because that has been brought to our attention a number of times by residents, is there a way that PD or whatever department can track maybe complaints on certain properties and address it that way instead of having an overall? Because it's going to continue, and I think we owe it to, if you're a good operator and you're not going to have any problems,
Don't end up
kick them out right, but if you're continuing the same issues that you're letting people party, then we need to address that individually, I think, of each property list.
Yeah, great. I will chat with Chief Peterson and Captain Hanegraaff on that and see what they can come up with for tracking and addressing those maybe more nuisance rental properties. They might be slowing down a little bit as we move into winter here too, so that's always helpful. The lighting design standards on various roads, it sounds like that really spoke to these blue streetlights throughout the city, right, Dave? And we're not really sure how or why. This seems to be more project-based, but it was put on this list, so we're just kind of saying we're not gonna focus our efforts on that right now because it is more project-based.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a case-by-case basis of when you're gonna discuss if we wanna do decorative lighting or, no lighting or just midnight cobras. I don't think we should set a policy because it's gonna be project specific of where it makes sense or where it doesn't.
Oh, so you're saying don't set a policy, let it be case by case.
Yeah, because if you set a policy that we want all blue poles, well, then you're gonna have some neighborhood that you're putting blue poles in, or you're gonna have to do a county road where you're gonna wanna specify it, or like Headwaters, they're black out there.
Would you designate certain areas though, so that you don't end up with different answers based on project on the council at the time? We don't need to decide this now, but that's the one thing I ask is, do we end up with loopholes and, because that was the decision of that council and the next council hates loopholes and.
That's fair.
That is fair, but we may get to County Road 32 and to put light poles from Everton all the way to 61 will cost $700,000. So do you want it as your policy that when we put up lighting, we want to have blue poles?
And I'm also kidding myself that future council, if they don't like the policy, they're gonna change the policy anyway, so there is only so much plan. One thing that has been helpful in this though is I do like it when council's kind of struggling over it. Of course, we never like the cost of a project and we're kind of struggling, and Ryan will pipe up and say, well, remember, that was the design that was, this is part of the 61 corridor project, or whatever he'll say, and then the vision at that time, and it is a good reminder at the moment where we do have some of those designated places, but maybe that's the first question when council picks this up is, do we desire to have a policy?
Yeah, I mean, there's always nice things, but it all comes with a cost. We just talked about the meetings too. I mean, back when that happened, all they did was put in concrete meetings. None of us would have known the difference, and we would not been talking about $1 million to redo it. So I mean, the stuff you add in are the amenities, but they also come with an upfront cost and a long-term cost.
Remind me, Dave, the poles that, new ones that go in and headwaters, are those, what color are those going, that the county's putting in now?
I believe you guys decided on black, didn't you?
So I gotta move blue. I want to move blue.
It's like, because I believe all the lights down headwaters, both directions are black, so.
Okay.
I believe the,
Is that why we went black? I'm not recalling.
Ryan wrote it down and
Only
told the
for numbers.
counties, I can confirm. Whatever you guys decided, he told them that's what colors.
Yeah, that's fine.
The dissenting voice is always gonna be the voice that remembers. Everyone else is water under the bridge, but the dissenting caller always remembers.
So,
Well-
we can go back to that in 2025, but it just shouldn't be a priority for discussion right now while we're,
Yeah, we agree.
where we're at staffing wise and transition. Vacant city parcels, Abby has suggested that she'd like to see this as moved to the EDA work plan for discussion, but she said that she's happy to put together a list of the parcels to send out to council for informational purposes, so everyone knows where those parcels exist and how many we have, because it sounds like there's quite a few.
Good idea.
Yeah,
We also, just for context in this conversation, with Lake Jolene and I talked about, there's a bit of a side-by-side work plan out, probably also with parks, because a lot of those city-owned parcels are related to parks in some sort, or green space or something, so.
yeah, absolutely.
Future Park Commission can look at that as well.
Yep. The one-way street policy. We're just suggesting we pump the brakes on that. We've had the one request, and Dave, I was gonna ask you and I forgot. The folks on Everson, where we at with, that just kind of,
What happened is that just kind of disappeared, so I think we were, someone, I don't think we got final direction on what we were supposed to do there, other than we were supposed to develop a policy, I believe.
yeah.
Well, in my conversation, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
In my conversation with Ryan on this, he just, I don't know if he was agreed, I'm not speaking for him, that we actually have to, we've had one request, and this idea of, well, that'll set a precedent also for all these more requests, he doesn't really completely agree with. And so, because so many situations, each of these situations so differently, to have one policy, blanket policy to cover all that, I don't know how you actually do that. I think just having some conversation back to that neighborhood about, you'd have to have all your garbage on one side, you have to kind of back them off a little bit, like, yeah, maybe we don't want to do that, but I think just communication to that neighborhood about what this might look like. I mean, maybe the policy part has to be talking about garbage on one side of the street, I don't know, but I think we owe them some kind of, like, a time where we're at, and if we think we want to do a policy, I don't know.
We talked about that, closing the loop with that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Just that there's more work to be done on it. I mean, so you're advocating for a policy or against a
No,
policy?
I'm not. I don't think we have to have, like, I guess I'm advocating both ways. I don't know if we
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I don't know if we necessarily have to, because, other than, yes, some specific things that are universal to every situation, like garbage, but.
Mailboxes.
Huh?
Mailboxes.
Mailboxes, potentially, but this just seems like another policy for another policy when they're all just different, and how do you really I mean, even the streetlight thing, where we have this policy, but now we're kind of weighing a little bit on that, like, yeah, and I mean, look at that, maybe that policy is a little bit too restrictive in what would require or trigger a streetlight.
Also, how often is it that homeowners on the street are gonna ask for a one-way?
Not right.
It's very, I would say it's gotta be incredibly rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that instance, is the conversation back to them around making sure that they're aligned, that the expectation would be, the need would be that garbage is all on one side of the street, and then also the reminder that the change in signage and the city costs around doing that conversion is accessible back to them? Is that, and I guess maybe that comes from a place of assuming that we would assess those costs back. We're gonna have the same exact type of conversation down below when we talk about this private road. Because I think sometimes people think, when they make the ask, they just assume that the city's gonna take on that, and I don't think we have to. And if we're gonna make this at a resident's request, I think it's also fair that we would ask them to take on those costs. For sure, when we talk about this public road or the
Agreed.
private road.
Agreed.
And maybe we would say it's nominal and it's not worth the assessment process, it's not gonna be a big deal for signage, but some streets can be pretty significant.
So when you talk through it that way, I guess maybe a policy does, on those things that are universal to all neighborhoods, you do need something
And maybe we
for
just
those things.
fashion it as a petition policy. If someone wants to petition for A, B, C, or D, public road, one-way street, and we list out all of those different
Yeah.
petition options, maybe we kind of wrap them all in one package.
Yeah,
On this particular one, I don't know if it would be Dave's role or whose role would be to reach out to the resident that did the petition. Just think some of these things, like, I have kind of had some conversations with them about what this might entail. And then maybe when you're with it, they can as a neighborhood discuss that, and maybe that at least we're moving on it, putting the ball back in their court, and then come back to us with, if you really want to move forward.
Right,
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's good.
Okay. Well, we won't work on a one-way street policy right now, but we'll continue this discussion, and Dave, just kind of, maybe we can check in tomorrow and see where we should be with checking in with those folks.
Yeah, I can reach back out with them too. I still think we need some type of policy just on how we accept a petition. Even to that basic of it, just like a streetlight, it's what triggers it, do you need?
Yeah.
Say there's 50 people that live on that road, do all 50 people have to say yes? Can it be, is it a majority, is it people on both sides of the one way? I mean, that's the stuff I think. And creating the one way isn't that big of a deal, it's determining, or is it valid and should we allow this, how far out do we vet to make sure that we made these 10 people happy, but we really irritated these 40 people who now have to go all the way around the block to get back to where they started. I think that's where it'd be nice to spell out for council and myself to say, okay, we want this a one way, well, who all wants it? Well, just us five. Okay, well,
And in having that policy, what I'm hearing from you is it gives you feedback that council's kind of pre-approved, that you can tell whoever the petitioner, so they can decide, oh my goodness, that we're just not gonna get that, we're not gonna get 75% of our street to agree, or we don't like the cost or whatever, then maybe it's just not a petition.
And we ran in with streetlights, when you say you need everyone within 500 feet to sign a petition saying that the light's not gonna bother them, and you get some severe. My neighbor's never gonna sign up on that.
Yeah.
So they just get it done. And I think if you can have a baseline of, once you've met these thresholds, then it will go to council for consideration.
Maybe just
If you don't hit these thresholds, then it's a denial, or, until you reach this, don't come to the council and present your petition.
Does the league have some templates around this?
I'll look around and see, I'm sure there's gotta be something.
A lot of cities address petitions and processes in their ordinances too. Okay, so I mean, we'll continue that discussion, but I think right now, being that we don't have residents pounding down the doors at City Hall, trying to get these initiatives and these one-way streets approved, I don't think it needs to be a priority just for where we sit today and in the next month or so here. The review.
Just to catch up on that tonight, just reach out to the group and just say, hey, we're still working through a policy and
Yeah, but if you would, whoever brought those points up, was you or Ryan about the garbage and maybe the mailbox, all that, if you kind of just put that bug in their ear to like, maybe they'll be like, okay, the appetite isn't as much then.
Yeah.
That would be great.
do.
Review fund balance policy. Kevin has just suggested that right now we, focus on getting through passing the 2025 budget, then we revisit that. I think that's just common sense with where we're at right now. So as long as everyone's okay with that, we'll leave that. And then these next four that I've added here, Mara mentioned Kathy Bystrom had planted a bug about maybe Leela coming and doing a community presentation for council, just to kind of share the great things that that school's doing here in our community and in our region. So I don't think it needs to be a priority to get them here because, man, we're at the end of October already. I mean, the end of the year is coming quick. So I think it would be great for them to do that. Maybe as we get a new council seated, that would be a good educational component for council too. The JD4 update. So I touched on this a little bit in the weekly update that I sent out on Friday. Once we kind of got a bigger look at how this project was developing and moving forward, legal kind of raised some red flags and said, wait, we need to slow down on this because there's some things here that haven't been vetted through legal, and we really need to make sure that we are being compliant with different laws and so there's some land acquisition issues. So it's important, but given where we're at and what it's going to take to make sure that we are being compliant with the laws and that we are not violating anyone's rights with land acquisition, we need to kind of slow that down and put that not necessarily on the back burner, but it's not going to be quite the initiative and moving forward quite as quickly as we had originally planned. So it's unfortunate, but we also don't want to jeopardize potential big chunk of change through grant funds by, violating someone's rights and going about land acquisition the wrong way. So,
Further context on this, I think Amanda became aware of where the project was at and hadn't maybe been fully in the loop until very recently.
Correct.
And so I think part of her request was also just letting her have time to get up to speed and work with staff, get some more guidance before she's coming back before council.
Yep, agreed. So we're just gonna kind of, she suspects that we'll be bringing this forward again early in 2025. This last week, we received a couple requests from residents. The board at the Park Place brought forward a request for speed bumps in the municipal parking lot. Dave, this has come up before, hasn't it, a couple times?
Not in the municipal parking lot, but in other parts of town,
Okay.
on Everton and like by Summerfield and a couple other spots.
Yeah. This is gonna have to be, a policy discussion and decisions by council. But, we are getting close to winter here, and it would be difficult to move forward with anything right now at this point in the year. So I just think that it's something we put down for some discussion over the winter months so that you guys can work through that and make some decisions. But I don't think it's something we need to focus on here in the last quarter of the year.
Rather than put them in and rip them right out after the first snowfall.
Right.
Not on purpose, of course, but just
That's the
remember
only,
that they're
that's
there.
the only downside
Yeah,
of what happens when it snows,
right.
because they drive too fast in these parking lots. Horrible.
Oh, yeah. They do. And with all the kids going back and forth at the park there, I mean, it's a valid concern, it really is. So we'll bring that forward into the new year, just for some policy discussions and for decision-making specific to that request. And then this petition for a private road to a public road, this kind of ties in with one-way street policy. I reached out to the residents who submitted their request and their petition and let them know that we're gonna kind of pull together some costs and some timelines to bring back to them so that as a group, they can decide if that's something they want to move forward with, because I think specific with this one, there's some pretty significant costs that are gonna be incurred. And I don't think based on their request, that they were really thinking about any potential assessments, so I think it's important that we provide them some information so they can make a decision if they want to move forward or not. But I think that should tie into some future policy discussion down the road. I think that by the time we kind of get those numbers and some more information for this neighborhood, we're gonna be into 2025 anyway, so I didn't want to make that a priority right now. Obviously, it's important, I'll keep in touch with them, and I've reached out to Amanda too, and we'll start working on it, but I just don't think that it's something that we need to add to an upcoming meeting agenda.
So just a couple questions on that. Point of clarity on, are properties like that, are they taxed considerably less because we're not maintaining the road? Is that factored into what their assessed value is and all that? Or are they paying as much as the neighbor where that road stops? Because I'm familiar with that, is where the road blacktop stops and it becomes private and they're both on the lake there, do you think they're taxed pretty similar? Is there a different, where when you talk about these additional costs, I mean, if these are taxpayers for the city, and now all of a sudden we're gonna plow it, maybe is that what we're talking about, extra costs of plowing and all that, and that would be assessed back to them somehow,
The
or?
extra cost of turning into public right away, because right now it's, this specific request, the people who made the petition don't even own the property that the roadway easement's on. So their neighbor on the other side of the road actually has the roadway easement on their property.
There's
So
that.
this one's very unique that sometimes they all have deeded access. It would be a matter of, getting that right away, but you have to also, this person may not want to turn it into public right away either. I mean, there's those steps as well.
So we're not plowing it right now, maintaining, doing anything?
I think sometimes also these come up because the property owners get to a spot where the deferred maintenance is so bad that they just and maybe it's new homeowners that come in and they're like, well, this is just crazy, why are we trying to do this? And to me, if that's the case, and there's a big catch-up project to get that even into a plowable condition, we should consider that. It doesn't have to necessarily be 100%, but something to bring that into what would be city standard, I think would be fair.
We typically don't want to accept a gravel road either. I mean, so if it's be accepted as a public right of way, we want the road to be blacktop. Why would we want to take on another additional gravel road? We're trying to get rid of gravel roads, not add them in.
Is this one that was petitioned to gravel road?
Yes.
I think it is, right?
It's kind of the same as Everton off the 210 photo right there, Joe. And that road is just falling apart, and it's a gravel road, and it's, but they can't get enough people to, petition to turn it right now.
In those instances, what was the agreement? And maybe it's different for every project, but was there just a mindset that that developer didn't want to meet city standards, and so
at the time, township or city just said, okay, fine, keep it a private road and do your project? Or,
So the south side one, I don't know, that's quite old, and really the easement's there because we have sanitary sewer running through there.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I believe probably on their deed, it's showing a drainage utility easement, which is kind of turned into a road easement. Said Amanda's looked into that one specifically, and some of them don't even have deeded access. But then on the flip side, on the north side, 217 is all private, and that whole group, they seal coat it, they put in speed bumps, everyone's out there maintaining it. So I mean,
right,
if you have the right group of people, they
but
take
it works,
care of it
it works
just
really
fine.
well,
Yeah.
right?
Yep, that whole loop down there, Fenway Court, and Fenway, it's, they ditch mow, they do everything.
Yeah.
You know, they've accepted their private road now, take part of it, it's just. So you don't want to be too quick to jump and take private roads either, because it works well if you have a group of people that want to take care of it.
So specific to that one, I don't anticipate bringing anything forward to council anytime soon, but we probably will, after we provide a little bit, do a little more analysis on that request. But I just kind of wanted to, it's on the list, but it's not coming to council very soon because I think the residents deserve a pretty holistic picture of what they're looking at before we ask council to make decisions on it.
I think once Amanda makes her checklist
Yeah.
on top of just determining kind of like along the way how many people you need for a petition to go through, that'll create that policy right there with here's a petition, here's a checklist you may want to keep in mind before you petition to the council, and it'll be a pretty good statement.
So the final-
To have the light bulb blue, on March 3rd, March 11th. Council approved blue traffic lights, they're gonna be blue.
Oh, there.
What? Come on.
So the last page of that is just the original list, as it was kind of laid out, and just put more in there for your reference, but if you guys are okay with kind of moving forward with what staff has kind of proposed to keep on a current focus and pump the brakes on a couple other things till we get into the new year. Otherwise, if you have suggestions and moving stuff around, I'm happy to do that too. But these are just our proposals, because I know this list is important and it's gonna go to over council, so.
Yeah, it's really helpful to kind of keep everything on our radar, but prioritizing it, given all that we're trying to accomplish through the fourth quarter makes no sense.
Yeah, it's a big quarter, there's a lot going on.
All right, any other points of feedback on that? Good?
And obviously reach out to me if something comes up and you thought about it and you want to discuss it further, I'm happy to chat about it.
Just do a quick date check on a couple things. So next council meeting is certainly Monday, the 28th, regular council meeting at 7 o'clock. And then we are still on for interviews, correct? Interview day, Friday, November 1st?
Yes, and just to confirm, so I've gotten a few folks from the community stakeholder group who have confirmed they'd be available to participate. I don't think quite as many as last time, but we're planning kind of a 11 a.m.-ish tour. Is that the plan? A lunch and then afternoon interviews? Was that what we were kind of thinking? Okay. Yeah, so we are on for that, and it sounds like the two candidates that we now have made travel arrangements, and they'll be here, so.
Excellent. So we'll have 3 different interview panels, 2 candidates, so we'll just kind of cycle through. Is that the thought?
That's kind of the plan, yeah.
Perfect. And then wrap up with council deliberation time at the end. Okay.
Yep. Maybe we won't be here quite as late since we're only doing the 2 candidates, so it'll be nice for a Friday.
All right. That is the end of our planned agenda. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Are you? Yeah. Are you?